Kievan Rus, 900 to 1200 CE. We're looking at the areas, I'm not sure if the pointer will show up on here, but Kievan Rus, you've got the Baltic Sea down to the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea up to the White Sea. That area there, that's largely what we're talking about when we say Kievan Rus. The inhabitants of Russia changed over time, but it was mostly in the eastern part of the empire you had Slavs. In the northern part, Finns, which coincidentally is near present-day Finland. And then in the southern part, Turks, which is near present-day Turkey. These people were primarily forest dwellers, nomads. There was a little bit of farming that went on in the area, and they traded with one another. And Kievan Rus was even somewhat connected to the Silk Road. The Rus were Slavs, Rus was a Slavic society that built their capital in present-day Kiev. In 980, Vladimir I became the first Grand Prince of Kiev. He adopted Orthodox Christianity, which is the type of Christianity that they had in the Byzantine Empire. Remember, I told you that the trade during this time is not going from east to west, as Constantinople right here near the Black Sea. It's going north and south. So the main trade. So it's no coincidence that these Russians, or who are the people that are going to be the Russians, adopt Christianity. So Vladimir I adopts Orthodox Christianity. He copied the Byzantines largely by the types of buildings that he made, by building churches. He adopted the Cyrillic alphabet, which is the alphabet that Cyril and Methodius made up for the spread of Christianity into Kievan Rus. And they also traded with the Byzantines. There was a lot of internal political struggles, internal political struggles and conflict with a lot of external forces that are going to lead to the decline of Kievan Rus around the year 1100 CE. So they come to power, they last for 120 years or so, and then they already start to go into a decline. The power in Kiev comes from trade, not agriculture. I said earlier that a very minimal number of people actually engaged in trade. So the main way that power is going to be gained during this time period is through trade. So think about this. This is a comparative. Manualism, which was the economic structure of Western Europe, is not going to be as big in Russia as it was in Western Europe because they're more dependent on trade. And the reason that agriculture was not, manualism did not become very big is because of the land in the northern latitudes is not the best for farming. The cities in Kievan Rus were mostly trading posts. Most of the buildings that they had were made out of wood, which is a sign that they're not going to last very long. Christianity mostly displaced polytheism, but some people still clung to their pagan practices, to their polytheistic practices. They were at their height. There's a resurgence in Kievan Rus. It declines a little around 1100. There's a resurgence, and they reach their height of power in in the year 1237. After 1237, they lose a lot of power. And the reason that they lose a lot of power is they're invaded by the Mongolians. Now, we'll get to the Mongolians at another chapter, but the Mongolians invade Kievan Rus in 1237 and take them over. Western Europe goes through a revival. Let's talk about how Western Europe, so now we're leaving Kievan Rus, we're going back to a Western European revival. Roughly between the years 1000 and 1200. Prior to this, so for the last 700 years, Europe has been all about it's been a subsistence economy in Europe. So what that means is that the only thing that the Europeans have been able to do is to meet people's basic needs. There's been no real advancements being made. Well, around the year 1000, between 1000 and 1200 CE, we start to see a revival. And most historians credit this to Italy and Flanders. Italy is present-day Italy. Flanders is present-day Netherlands in that area, Belgium. And so these two areas are going to have a resurgence in the economy. They're going to have a revival. There's going to be more trade going on. They're going to start trading with the outside world. And when they start trading with the outside world, we're going to see new technology being introduced into Europe. And this is going to turn Italy and Flanders into trading states. And so this is going to cause some economic growth and a revival. Most populations are going to double because of new technologies that are brought into Europe, specifically technologies that impact farming. For example, there's a stronger plow. Now, the reason a stronger plow is important, it's going to increase the amount of land that you can farm. A lot of the land in Europe was considered unfarmable, non-arable land because the plow was not strong enough to break the land up for planting. With a stronger plow, you can plow harder land that is more tougher, and you can create more farmland, more food, rise in population. And so they're also going to get a stronger horse collar, which is going to allow the horse to pull heavier loads. Cities are going to grow, and a lot of serfs are going to start leaving their manors and going to the city to look for jobs. Coins are going to be used again. We're going to see a resurgence in coin usage. Italy is going to come in contact with Asia, and they're going to want to trade. So during the Middle Ages, the Silk Road is not really being used that much. And so the Europeans are going to revive that trade with Asia that they had. The Romans traded with Asia along the Silk Road, but the people in the Middle Ages did not. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, we're going to see a resurgence in that. And think about this, they're even going to start with the Europeans. It's going to lead to the age of exploration because the Europeans are looking for a quicker way to Asia than the Silk Road. And so that's why they're going to start getting in boats heading around Africa, going to Asia for the spice trade. And that's what's going to prompt Columbus to sail west, trying to find a quicker passage to Asia. Isolation is pretty much over towards the end of the Middle Ages. The Crusades. The Crusades was a series of religiously inspired campaigns. Prior to the Crusades, the Muslim leaders protected Christians. Christians would go on pilgrimages to the Holy Land to visit the places that Jesus lived. Prior to the Crusades, the Muslims would offer the Christians some protection. As the Christians are traveling, they needed to be protected from bandits and things like that. And so the Muslim leaders would protect the Christians. Christians wanted to increase trade, and the Pope promised atonement from sins for the Crusades. So what's going to happen is the Christians are going to start saying it's not enough that we go and visit the land. We want to control the land. And so the Christians are going to seek to get the Holy Land back from the Muslims for themselves so that they can control the Holy Land. And so Pope Urban II is going to give a command for the Western Church to go and help reclaim the Holy Land. And this is going to come after the Byzantine Emperor Alexius Comnenus is going to ask for help against fighting the Muslims. Most of the people that fought in the Crusades were young knights. These young knights wanted to fight. They were very ambitious. They wanted new land to conquer. The Italian merchants wanted to increase trade, and so let's go take some new lands to increase trade. Christian pilgrims had been traveling to the Holy Land for a long time under the protection, but they're going to disrupt that protection because they want it for themselves. Now, we've got a list of details. Let me see, actually. I'm not sure if I'm able to get out of this PowerPoint and bring up another one, because there's a list of things that are going to happen during the Crusades. I apologize, I should have opened this prior. During the main Crusades, I've got a list of things that's going to happen on 4 of these Crusades. All right. All right. So let's take a look at this. The First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099. So we'll go back to the map in a moment and look at that. I wish I had this on the same slide. The First Crusade captured Jerusalem in 1099. The Second and Third Crusades sought to protect the gains of the First Crusade. So the First Crusade, the Christians got Jerusalem, but then they fight the Second and the Third Crusades to keep that land. The Muslims reclaim it in 1187. The Fourth Crusade was actually against Constantinople. The knights from Western Europe were so frustrated that they lost the land that had been won roughly 90 years prior to them, that on the way back in the year 1204, they attacked Constantinople to get money to help pay the cost of transporting the armies. So they kind of turn on themselves. So let's go back and take a look at the map here. And so what we can see is that the First Crusade, which is in red, they take Jerusalem. The Second and the Third Crusade is just about keeping the land. And then notice the Fourth Crusade doesn't even make it to the Holy Land. The Fourth Crusade is straight at Constantinople to regain a lot of that stuff that they had. The impact of the Crusades. The Crusades had a limited impact on the Muslim world. Other than disrupting the relationships between the Muslims are not that affected by the Crusades. They in the end, they still control the land. They don't lose the land. The Europeans were, the second impact of the Crusades, the Europeans were exposed to the Arabic translations of a lot of science manuscripts. They're exposed to Greek science. They're exposed to Greek philosophy. And so this is going to prompt more education in Western Europe. And then lastly, the Crusades are going to impact the European elite. They're going to see many goods that they want. And some examples are paper, refined sugar, hard soap, colored glass. And so these are some of the things that the Europeans are going to want. And they're going to say to the Muslims, hey, will you trade with us? Let's trade. And the Muslims are not very impressed with the European goods, and so they're not really inclined to trade with them. That's a wrap up of chapter 9. We will do the first half of chapter 10 in class tomorrow and on Wednesday.